here, Sacramento, California, Applied Behavior Analysis Conference. We got this diverse group of folks together. Everyone has different skill sets. So we were like, let's just huddle organically and shoot the shit about the industry, the trends. And we have someone who's an expert in compliance of medical and educational documentation. We have someone in the field that's directly been pounding the pavement. So you have a real diverse set. You got our CFO, who's a CPA, that uses artificial intelligence to examine financials and act on them. We got Adam, who has been a business owner and entrepreneur for 25 years, maybe?
Something like that, I don't know.
Yeah.
A long time.
He's been involved with mergers, acquisitions, you know. Isaac is pretty much the staple of ABA out in California, is what I would say. He's like the icon out here, maybe. and then Kate sees everything day to day that goes wrong, every single day, and she solves problems at like an OBM level and everything. So, no, thanks.
Chaos coordinator.
Oh my God, yeah, professional chaos coordinator. So yeah, figured let's just get together and
get your Dead Man's Test merch as well.
That's awesome.
From Kate.
That's really. Did you come up with that?
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Hot seller.
Is it a hot seller? Do people like it?
Seller, yeah. Today
So-
we wore the St. Patrick's Day gear.
Very cool. Very cool.
So yeah, this could be to anyone. This question I threw out, and I know you have some questions. One of them I threw down here was, what would you guys say is like the biggest misunderstanding or misconception about our field of applied behavior analysis, or what people call ABA therapy? Does anyone have like any info on what you would say is one of the big misunderstandings or misconceptions?
So autism. So if you think about it from a behavior analytic perspective, behavior goes where reinforcement flows, right? So, and the big reinforcer, if we're just going to be speaking honestly, is money. Where do we get paid to do stuff? With clients that are diagnosed with autism. So I think ABA gets lumped in with ABA therapy, which is often done with clients diagnosed with autism. And our science is so much more broad than that and can be applied to any human endeavor. But since the money is with working with individuals with special needs, that's what we get associated with. So I think from an outside perspective, people associate us with autism, but we can do so much more. Anything, business, science, technology, government. There's so many things wrong with our government that behavior analysis can help with, and sometimes it's disappointing to see that we get lumped in just with this one particular field. And it's great. It's great in a sense because we've done so much to improve the lives of the clients that we work with, but I wish there was more public education about the breadth of help that we can give to other industries. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
I think that's been like one of the biggest eye-opening things for me is how you can apply the behavior therapy and the science to business across the board. And I see Brett applying it effectively every single day. Another point to this is how people perceive it. I was just talking to our tax team about research and development and trying to see what applies for tax credits. And they were very sensitive with me about trying to walk around soft science versus hard science. And I was laughing with them. I'm like, guys, I'm not a doctor in this field. You're not going to offend me, right? But it's a good thing that doctors aren't here because they would be very offended if you're saying behavior science is not a hard science, right, with what Skinner's done. So I was curious, what's y'all's take on that too, like the foundation behind behavior science versus other sciences as well?
Yeah, I guess I think you're right on the head, both of you. I mean, it's systematic, it's lawful. In a lot of ways, it's similar to engineering, and behaviors occur for a reason. Sometimes it's complicated, but it seems like it just comes down to socially mediated consequences and internal things, and it's as complicated as people make it. It's really when you break it down, all about why people do what they do, and then if it's problematic, how do you get people to find a replacement behavior that, so it's like, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's working with individuals on the autism spectrum or just with employees in an organizational setting. You know, everyone has a reason they do what they do. And, you know, it's such a great science because if you understand why people do what they do, you can kind of get ahead of things. And what can't you do if you understand why people do what they do, right? You know what I mean? Like, what can you not accomplish if you just understand it? Now, it doesn't mean we can change it, but we understand why people do things. And it also helps you to not be defensive. You know, when someone comes at you and they're emotional and they explain to you, they really come at you with criticism, you can kind of sit back and try to understand how they got there. And you realize it's just behavior. It's not always like directed at you. You don't know what they went through that morning. You don't know if they slept the night before. You don't know if their history of possible abuse. You just, you know, it's all these variables, but when you just kind of break it down, you're like, you know what? It's just behavior. And that's what helps me sleep at night. What about you guys? I don't know.
I mean, to Sam's point, I think it's viewed as not a science because it is a really new buzzword in culture is ABA therapy. And like Adam had said, it's oftentimes only used when it's in conjunction with autism or a behavior disability. So it's not in everybody's everyday language in terms of why we do what we do, because it's just associated with autism and behavior disabilities. So if it becomes more of an everyday part of your life, then it becomes a science. You know what I mean? Because it's in your everyday verbal behavior, you're talking about it with someone, so it becomes more real. And I think that's a huge part of like why people don't know that it's a thing or that you're using it every day is because they just don't know about it. You only know what you know, right?
I think the best way in schools too to like disseminate the science and like to piggyback off that instead of like throwing jargon at staff, model it and like get that buy-in by maybe like small moments where the staff are using ABA in their own lives, like, you know, bring it up and discuss it. And then, like I said, instead of just throwing terminology, you can get buy-in by just modeling things.
To it.
You know,
Yeah, that's
Right.
so true. You know, I didn't even think of that. You know, it's like you don't have to sell it at all.
Yeah.
You get hands-on, you change behavior right in front of someone, and they're like, I'm a believer.
Right.
That or I love when you're able to point out when someone's already doing it and you're saying, this is ABA therapy. You're already doing it. And here's the fancy name for it, but it's already a part of your everyday life. And then they feel more success with it because they're like, oh, damn, I am doing this already.
What are some effective ways that you think you've been able to apply behavior therapy and the science behind it in business through the mergers and acquisitions, and then you, Isaac, as well, in your role leading the state of California?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I see everything through a behavior lens. I don't even know how not to at this point because I've been doing it for as long as I have. So to me, that's just my view, my worldview. And you know, I think the beauty of the science is that it's got such a long history with such really foundational principles. I mean, people have been doing this since the early 1900s, you know, all the way through now. I know now it's become a profession, but the science was formed a long time ago. And you know, the impact that it can make is beyond just individuals with autism or developmental disabilities. I think the principles can really help us make an impact anywhere we go, whether it's with ourselves or with other people or with organizations or with groups. And that's really the beauty of it. It's, you know, just really understanding and getting back to basics. Oftentimes I resolve issues with, you know, just going back to the basics, you know, what is the antecedent, what's the behavior, what's the consequence, what's driving this behavior, to really be able to understand that, you know, and then the concept of measurement. If there's ever something we don't understand, you know, I always like to start off by, you know, let's measure it. Let's really understand current levels, you know, and then be able to come up with some type of intervention to either make it go up or down type of thing. So it's just basic behavior analysis, but it has an impact anywhere you go. Wherever behavior is, behavior analysis can make an impact. So that's one of the things that really got me into this field early on in my career is that, you know, I remember reading a statement that said, don't go where the behavior analysts are, go where the behavior is, because we can make a difference. Yeah.
One of the funny things, I want to hear how it applies mergers and acquisition, but on this point, I'll never forget probably the first few months I had been working with Brett, and I was really frustrated one day. And I called him. It was late at night, and I was just frustrated and venting. And usually, when you're frustrated, the other person will get frustrated back at you, and you go back and forth, right? And Brett was like, "Oh, you're frustrated because of this, this, and this. Okay." And it was the most, it caught me so off guard. And he was like analyzing my behavior on the spot. And it just put me right in the lens of the behavior therapy immediately. And it was so interesting.
I remember
'cause-
silence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because we were just on the phone. I'm like, oh, he's going to kick my ass. And then I heard silence. I remember that,
I
moment
was like,
too. I was
wow.
walking around at the atrium, I think, and he had called, and we were talking about some challenges. And I just remember just trying to understand what those challenges were. And when I remember exactly what I was just trying to make sure I understood it by saying, all right, so it narrows down to these three things. It was funny because the silence, and I'm like, and then you're like, I want to be mad, but I'm not now. I'm not even mad now.
I was like, yeah, that is why I'm frustrated.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm more mad that you said it. But it was, yeah.
That was a big shock to me because the world I came from, you just apply behavior therapy in like literally every single component of your life, and it was just really interesting to see that lens.
It's interesting when you said that. I was thinking about it, and I was kind of putting myself in that place. By the way, that's such a Brett thing to do, to have a conversation at like Saturday night in the middle of the night. I don't know how many conversations I've had with him. Yeah, absolutely. But you ever notice that like when somebody's having a tough time and then you kind of behavior analyze their situation, it feels like when that's happened to me, it calms me down. It's like, because you have all this anxiety from everything that's going around, but when somebody calmly says, okay, well, these are the antecedents, these are the consequences, this is the data, like seeing all of that calms me down and it feels manageable all of a sudden. It's like, okay, it's not this giant leviathan that's gonna eat me and tear me apart. Now I understand what's causing it, what the outcomes are, this is what the data looks like, and it brings me peace. So I think when Brett does that for people, it's helpful. It's calming. It's not, and like you said, I have a few friends where you do this, or people in your life where you call them, you're frustrated, and they get frustrated about the situation with you. Yeah, and they amp you up. It might feel good in the moment, but it's not really helpful.
Yeah.
I need solutions. Tell me a solution, And the first step in solving it is analyzing it. What's going on? What caused it? What's happening as a result of it? What does the data look like?
I think that's because emotion is such an abstract construct. And then when you give data, the ABC or like a clear guideline, it becomes more organized and manageable, like you said. Now I have a clear action plan. There's something I can do about it.
It's definitely an objective approach, and that is calming in and of itself, versus being full of subjectivity. It also is a way to eliminate biases that we bring to a problem. When you strip it down to be like, what's going on, what's the data? I think you're right. Then it eliminates all those things. You have something more manageable, something that you could actually make a difference, and it's workable,
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something Brett said earlier, too, that I wanted to touch on, is that everybody's got their own situation. And, this has happened to me a few times when I'm running a business, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Brett, or anyone else, but you get into a position every once in a while where you start blaming somebody for everything that's going wrong. It's like this person is the linchpin for all of the problems at the company. That is never, ever the case. You can have somebody that has outsized influence, but it's never the case that one person is causing all of the problems. And I think if you take the approach that Brett suggested and think to yourself, every single human being, all of us, every single human being on the planet is suffering in a way that nobody else is. All of us, at some point, wake up in the morning or go to sleep at night worrying about something that maybe we don't share with anybody. Maybe we don't share with our kids or our spouses or whatever it is, but everybody's got their own unique situation. So to bring this full circle, I think when you do a behavior analysis, it allows you to be more understanding of what people are going through, and you're able to step back and say, this person isn't evil. They're a result of their environment. They're a result of their context, their situation, their circumstances, and then you can take an objective approach and start solving the problem instead of just blaming someone.
I think that's what makes a great leader, is being able to remove yourself from a situation that you're so ingrained in and look at it from like a macro level. Sometimes it's really easy to get lost in the sauce and give that emotional response back, especially in a meeting. I know we talked about that a little bit before when kind of doing those internal interviews and seeing what the course of the problem is or what had happened. And as a leader or a CEO or an entrepreneur, sometimes during those conversations, you want to have that explosive reaction. And it's not helpful for the situation. So to be able to take that step back, reflect on data, and come to the table with a solution, that's what makes you a good leader. Because if you just get caught up in it, you can make the situation much worse than it already started out to be.
I think just building on that, one of the things that I've always told myself, and I learned this at my last company, is my boss told me to always assume positive intent with the people that are under you and the people that are over you. It's sometimes really hard, and you get your emotions wrapped into like, someone is doing this and they're doing it to make my life more difficult. And you're not thinking about the fact that they're not trying to make your life more difficult. They're not trying to do anything mean. They're making a business decision, and it may not make sense to you. But I think when you can remove the emotion out of it and realize that they may be making a decision that you don't agree with, but it's not to make anyone's life harder. Like, as long as you assume that that person is doing what's right for, in our field, a lot of the times for the kids or for the staff, it helps you take that emotion out of it. And like, one, trust your leader. Two, to trust the people that are working under you, that if they did something differently or they made a mistake, there was no malice there. And I think assuming that positive intent helps a lot with like both leadership and then following somebody and trusting them. It's a big thing I've had to overcome a lot, just working in different companies.
Yeah, and it's almost like, though, if you were to assume an intent that's of malice, or that it's to get you, things like that, it's odd, though, because if you don't trust someone and you treat them as though you don't trust them, I think you start getting untrustworthy behavior, or that person's gone.
They pick up on it pretty quickly.
What's that?
They pick up on it really
Yeah,
quickly.
they're like, I'm not trusted, so either I'm going to give you a reason to not trust me, or I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why in accounting they say trust but verify,
Yeah.
right? And so you always want to go into an audit trusting what they're giving you, right? But then you verify it with the audit sample or whatever, right? So trust but verify kind of applies across the board here. I think another thing that's been really interesting to me over the past couple of days is just listening to the behavior science talk and listening to kind of how feedback is kind of a hot topic, right? And when I first got to the company, in the corporate world, you don't really get constant direct feedback like you do in this industry, right? In the corporate world, it's big drastic action. You don't really know you're not doing good until they put you on a PIP, right? And then you're like, okay, well, my time here is over, right? And so
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh, wow, my managers were telling me I was doing great, right? Then you come into the behavior therapy world that we're in, and feedback is constant, right? And it's built into everything that we do. So when y'all are in business and these leadership roles, how do y'all decide when to give positive feedback, when to give negative feedback, and then the reinforcement that goes with it?
I mean, the feedback literature in our field is pretty extensive, and a big thing is to know that there's different modalities of feedback, right? I think when we think of feedback, it's just verbal feedback, which gets a little bit scarier because we have to have a verbal exchange with somebody, and then there's going to be the emotions part of it. I really rely a lot on graphic feedback, which is super powerful as a starting point. So if you measure something, and then you're giving people access to the results of that measurement, the graph alone, I mean, we're surrounded by graphic feedback that makes such a big difference. I mean, we wear it on our wrists.
It's on our logo.
Everything, right? Yeah. So that's always my starting point, is if we've pinpointed the right things, if we set the right goals, if we're measuring it, and there's that report out system, to borrow from the 5 laws, that visual feedback as a starting point is powerful, and it can make moves, because nobody wants to see their behavior not be successful, right? People I believe that people have good intentions and they want to succeed, so they want to see their behavior go up, and then off of that, you could have the verbal feedback of what could be different to be able to support that. But I think to be able to use various feedback modalities is something that's really important. You don't just have to rely on that verbal exchange as the sole way of changing behavior, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then it's like the way it's delivered and the history of relationship matters too, whether you accept it or not. Because yeah, we all have had situations where someone gives you feedback that is critical or criticism or constructive, and something about it, it's like they did it to make themselves feel better, like a reprimand or something, because it made them feel better. But it wasn't really the feedback wasn't really relevant to improve your own performance or something. It's like, because we have histories sometimes where I could be just being bullied as a kid. You're being bullied and you're being criticized, and it is hard to measure intent, like you were saying. It's like,
Yeah. Well, I think the assuming positive intent goes back to both giving and receiving feedback, because if I don't think that you have good intentions, I'm not going to actually take the feedback that you have. I think that you're giving me feedback to come at me, and then I'm not improving in my leadership. So I think having those fundamental relationships and having reciprocal trust, and both assuming that the other person has positive intentions, helps, one, for me providing feedback to staff, and two, for them also like receiving that feedback. Because if they don't trust me and they don't trust my intent, they're going to think I'm giving them that to try to get them fired or to, mess with their compensation, not to make them better and a stronger staff member.
the history of workplace politics and then seeing people step on people to get to the top is one of the challenges, I think. And I think it's just about, the people that are in your corner, the ones that give you feedback historically, and then they follow up to see, hey, that person crushed it. And it's like that type of a coach or supervisor is what you got to look for.
Yeah.
Somebody who wants you to win so bad that they can taste it and they enjoy it with you.
And I think you also
that's
need
hard to
someone
find.
who has like a little bit like not fear in providing feedback, and also is okay giving it in multiple ways. Like, we just launched a new supervision system, and it's a state requirement. And we just had to go through a training with the BCs to say, don't tell the staff in person that they're doing a great job during your supervision, and then go home and rate them all 2s. And then they're going to get the log and be like, sorry for the language, but like, what do you mean? You just told me I'm doing great, and now I'm coming home and you're having me sign something saying that I'm a 2 in all of these areas. Like, I think as a good supervisor, you have to be comfortable in getting uncomfortable and telling them those things verbally, and not just going home and rating them a negative way, because then they're also not going to trust you, and then they're not going to assume positive intent because you said one thing to their face and then you wrote something else when you got home and you didn't have to talk to them about it.
Yeah, when it doesn't match up, it's disingenuous.
Do you feel like that's a two-way street? I feel like I did some work on feedback in the past, and it's not just about giving, it's about receiving too. So I feel like it's a skill set not just to give people feedback, and we were talking about this in the last talk, that when you recruit people and hire people, yes, you want to hire for grit and resilience, but can they take feedback? Taking feedback is a skill set. Like, yes, I understand, like active listening, asking follow-up questions, paraphrasing. Okay, so what you're saying is I need to do this, this, and this. Yes, okay, great, thanks. So I do feel like it's bi-directional and it's a two-way street.
Most definitely.
And it's that 5 to 1 positive to negative feedback rule. I always, if I'm giving feedback to a staff member, I think of gratitude, and I want to lead with all the reasons I'm grateful for them, and kind of set that tone that this isn't a punishment. This is going to be a solution-oriented discussion that's going to help you level up and grow. Because Brett always said, like, if you have a lot of passion, it kind of seeps out into other ways sometimes. So anyone that's giving feedback as a leader has to remember, like, they probably gotten it at some point, and to just remember, like, treat others the way you want to be treated, and lead with all those positive things. And really, before you give the feedback, to take a few minutes to prepare and pinpoint times where they were really meaningful to you, so you can really gain their attention and their trust before giving the corrective feedback.
Because the result of it's whether they trust you, right? Yeah. The result of your future behavior.
Well, that's the thing too. If you're a good supervisor, you're present and you're going to catch them doing good too. It's not always just about giving constructive feedback. Because if you're just giving constructive, at the end of the day, they're going to resent you at some point. There's no way to like feel as if you're growing in your professional setting, as if it's just constructive, constructive, constructive. And yes, it's meant to make you grow, but at the end of the day, it means you're not performing at a level that you should be. So it stings to some level or degree. It's just what you do with it, and how you apply it is what makes it important and makes you a great employee. And then being a good leader to follow up and say like, hey, I know that was really difficult, but you like really crushed that, like how you were saying before.
I think the pairing process, that rapport building process, to earn the right to give somebody feedback is so important. And I think a lot of people miss it just because they have positional authority and they're like, well, I'm the supervisor, you're my staff, so therefore you get my feedback. I think a lot of times you got to earn it, and you got to go through that pairing process for it to be effective. The other thing, it's kind of related to what you said, Chris, is I almost kind of consider, it's a hack that I use because I would say the majority of people have a punitive punishment history with feedback, right? So I know in my experience, if I were to schedule a meeting with the staff to be like, we're going to meet to give you feedback, they're not going to sleep at night. There's probably going to be an emotional reaction. And so then I just worked on reframing it. So I just accepted that mostly everybody has a punishment history with the word feedback. So therefore I call it coaching. Right. So I say, okay, so now I was like, hey, I want to meet with you to coach you. Oh, okay, cool. And it's the same thing, so I try to take a look at people's histories with that. And because I just accepted like people, have that history with the word feedback, let's call it something else. The mechanics are still the same. The results is really what's important to help them change. And,
Until somebody had that really mean high school football coach, and
we'll change the word. We'll call it something else. We'll keep on changing.
It's interesting too, because you guys are talking a lot about ratios here, like 5 to 1, 3 to 5 to 1, that sort of thing. When you're leading, managing, supervising, whatever word you want to use, coaching a lot of different people, do you guys find that it's difficult to keep track of where you are on the ratio schedule? It's like, okay, I provided Sam with a whole bunch of reinforcement yesterday, so he's good for a while. But I just dumped on Brett yesterday. And Kate, it's been a mixed bag, and I haven't even talked to Isaac yet. So if you've got like 10 people that you're supervising, you have to create a system for yourself where you're keeping track of all of these ratios. So it can be a challenge, can it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that, and I feel like it just comes off.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh shit! I'm like, shit! I forgot I mentioned that to Sam 3 times. Yeah. And he's like, you told me that twice.
And
Once was enough.
yeah, and like you overdo it with one person to make up with the other person, and it doesn't work that way.
The biggest one that I found when I came into the company was that it would be different performance requirements and KPIs for the same position doing the same exact thing in the same county, right? So you'd have 5 people that are in the same region, should be on the same type of compensation schedule, all with varying requirements that need to be tracked daily and weekly, and it's impossible to keep track of if they're all different. If it's standardized by the position that they're in, then it's easier. We could say, okay, for this program, here's the requirements, and are all of them maintaining these requirements, right? So that it's funny that you're saying that, because it's something that we're still working through because there were so many systems, and he's in the field, so he can probably attest to it too.
Yeah, like when we were doing Smash My Goal, a lot of times our top performers, or even so the staff that need the most assistance, we would spend so much time in the week giving them support. And then we weren't, our top performers who should be getting reinforced were kind of not forgetting, but they're not getting equal positive reinforcement, and that sticking to that ratio just because you might have that natural need where, okay, this is a seasoned staff member and they might not need as much support where there's a brand new staff member. But as a OBC, I remember that was some growing pains where I wanted to be an equal field of love I'm giving to like my family, my staff, not just like that favorite child or like the staff member that needs the most support. I like, you want to keep it nice and even.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, in any workplace industry, especially ours, is that like we can't find. Inherently, incentive systems and organizations are set up to be where you're paid by the hour or you're paid by salary, and the difficulty there is that you're rewarded just for passing time. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we find. And I just think some of the other models of organizational incentives, even like an Uber driver or someone who's delivering DoorDash, or if you're a server, you're like on this variable ratio schedule where the more you hustle, the more you're going to be paid or rewarded. And any job that is by the hour or salary only, that just it inevitably, if there's days you don't like what you're doing, you're just looking at your watch. You're trying to pass time. So the hard part is trying to figure out ways to, like, on the spot, like catch human performance, reward the shit out of it, and make it real. And that's one of the hard parts. So we've tried. There's all these iterations over the years where we try to figure out. All right, there was the one where we try to stand people in person. Other ones where we try to give a shout out and then put it on a platform. But that's the hardest part. If that could be solved, where there's just rapid feedback and people are truly rewarded for their actions, not time, like that would just bring performance to a whole nother level if we just had models that way. But then again, if you look at industry, you could have unions that say no way. You could have a bureaucracy of a board that says no, everyone's got to be treated equal. But the reality is that high-performing teams, not everyone's equal in how they perform, but sometimes that's the best part about it. Everyone has different things they're good at.
So you're saying Uber ratings for the ABA clinician?
Yeah. Like right after
or
an
Google ratings
interaction.
for an individual.
Right after an interaction, if
Right.
someone got like feedback right after it, you can guarantee that would change their behavior.
It makes them more likely that they'll be picked for clients to work with, or that they'll be up for promotions and things like that. So having that feedback or that graphic feedback to follow them is very important.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge, and I speak from experience in a state that's super stringent, is the labor laws don't help us use that behavior innovation to be able to do that. Because I think it could make a huge impact, but our system overall is not set up in a way to leverage behavior science to be able to get the best out of people. So it's almost like it enables lack of performance, or what they call presentism, which is people showing up just to be there but not performing, type of thing. So that's one of the barriers. But I agree. I mean, I think systems like that would maximize performance because we're really using behavior science. It just I don't see it that for many states that it coincides with the labor laws, which then makes it challenging.
That's exactly right, because you're
that's
going to run into one thing after another. But I'll tell you what, I would so much rather risk a liability by trying to reward high performers. I would rather risk that than and deal with the consequences of someone saying it's not fair, as long as it's really measurable and you can prove it. Because then there's no discrimination. You know damn well if someone's going to work with your most precious asset, which is your child, don't you want the best? You don't want the person looking at their watch. You don't want everyone to be paid exactly the same amount for doing different levels of work.
So then, in your opinion, what do people in the field need, so professionals, the most to thrive, to provide that type of support?
Probably in the very beginning stage, just what the science would suggest, or in the very beginning stages of learning anything new, they're going to need real frequent FR1 schedule feedback. Like right off the bat, when someone doesn't know what they're doing, they're going to need that assurance every single response they make. And the more rapid they can do it, the quicker they're going to learn. That's why when we were talking there, I'm like, look, make a shitload of mistakes with the right intent and the right goal. The more at-bats you have, the more likely you're going to learn rapidly. And
I think also just allowing them to know that they can make mistakes. Like one of the things that stuck out to me when I interviewed at BDAs, I was told, like, we make it impossible for you to fail as long as you're willing to show up. Like, it's okay if you don't run an intervention perfectly, as long as your heart is in it. So I think the success is what Brett had talked about earlier in his presentation, is allowing your supervisees to know that it's okay for them to fail, that you'll still support them, that, as long as they're showing up and they care about the kids, that's what matters. If you run DTT wrong or you use a wrong terminology, that's okay. Your job's never going to be on the line for it. Like, follow your gut, do what's best for the kids, and we'll provide you all the rest of the coaching. And I think that reassurance gives the staff a lot more confidence to go into their role. And I also think this is a naturally rewarding field. Like, you see the client's progress, and that always kept me going. And I think once I was more confident in myself and I had great supervisors, my clients made more progress. So I didn't just need that reinforcement from them. I started seeing it in my clients. So I think giving people the opportunity to fail and to know that that's okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is like talking about as many times to swing at bat as possible, right? And I think the other thing that plays into this has been a big thing for me coming here is a constant decision of when to act rapidly and when to take your time for a decision, right? But in order to keep getting up and swinging for that home run, you have to act rapidly, because you're only going to have so many swings in a period of time, right? So what I see in our organization is a constant battle between fast movers that want to move immediately, right now, slow movers that never want to move ever, right? And then you got people that are in the spectrum in between, right? So if I were to categorize this, I'd say Brett's a fast mover, right? Like when we go, and it's time to go, right? If I were to categorize Isaac, I'd push him more to the slow mover, but not a slow mover, right? He's more analytical when he's thinking. And I'd probably put me right in the middle of both of them, right? And so what that does is it allows us to have these conversations from different standpoints and different views on, we should act right now. We should take a step back and really think about how we're going to act. Okay, we need to make this decision now. And you can have these conversations. If everybody was a fast mover, everything would be broken all the time and there'd be no fixing it. If everybody was a slow mover, nothing would ever get done, but we'd do a lot of talking and thinking about it, you know? So you need this, you need so many varying viewpoints in the organization actually come to a good decision. But you need to act rapidly at all times, even if the decision is to act a little bit less rapidly, or you're going to miss the chances at bat, you know? And I think so many people get stuck thinking about going to bat without ever swinging it, you know?
Yeah, certain opportunities have a limited window. And I do notice organizationally, that balance is difficult, because it was great having a fresh perspective of someone like you coming from the corporate world into the human services world, and us just being able to like, you're exactly right. Somehow in between, you need that balance, because as you were building out systems for all of us that would benefit us in the long run, save us time, get into a flow, have it run itself by thoughtfully, systematically planning things and creating the systems behind it. Those things would just pay dividends in the long run, right? And then there would be where we were constantly in flux would be, there was an immediate problem. How do we solve this temporarily without that's the hard part. How do you temporarily solve it, stop the bleeding at the same time as you're building out a system that'll be sustainable, right? And it was always like a balance. I always found myself like, all right, let me just stop the bleeding here where financially, or let me stop the retention bleeding right here as we work on it. And it's like, if you have that blend, you know, it's powerful.
I just want to piggyback off like what you guys said with like all have the same goal, but you move at like different frequencies, like slow movers, fast movers. Like in my position in the field, you'll get that like depending on which classroom you go in and like which staff it is. So for instance, I have an outgoing personality, and I might be working with an ES middle schooler, and he might gravitate towards me more so than an introvert. On the other end, there might be times where I'm in the class and there's a very shy student who is sensitive to loud noises, and there's that staff member that we should identify might have this more of an introverted personality and is approachable, unlike me, bald, tattoos, and loud, and like, you know, full of energy. And as a leader, I always try to reinforce the slow movers. In the military, we used to say slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Because
I love that.
yeah, so moving at like your slow movers, it doesn't mean that they're performing slow. It means that their art and their method of how they're doing things is slower. So I always try to reinforce those staff members that being a great staff member isn't just opening up a door, what's up, and having this overwhelming energy. You have to have that refined, because that can almost be aversive sometimes. And in my experience, some classes and teachers even preferred the lower maintenance type staff member due to just the students responding better. So I just wanted to relate on
that's a great
mine.
quote. I actually used that quote in one of my presentations because I thought it was such a poignant thing. Denzel Washington, I remember seeing a video on him, and and I'm going to butcher the quote. But he says something about just because you're moving fast and you're moving doesn't mean you're moving forward. You could just be moving all different directions, So it's kind of like piggyback off of that, you got to be moving forward, and sometimes speed isn't the biggest indicator of you making progress. Yeah.
I think there's different operational definitions for our slow movers. So I guess when I
Slow
think
movers are still fast movers at BDA. let me tell you.
They're smooth, right?
We got no choice.
Let me tell you.
Analyze quick and go.
but I know we're using like slow movers and risk-taking behavior from a hiring standpoint, right? From an organization. Do we find that there are more people coming in from this generation that are less of a risk taker, so they're not learning, or their skill sets are not growing at a more rapid pace because of that, being that there are so many guardrails now for them from elementary to college in terms of reducing that adversity, reducing that risk-taking behavior. I've seen many statistics come up that students don't want to drive anymore. They don't want to put themselves up to take the driving test. Not that partying is great for kids, but they're not going out and socializing, and they're not doing all of those aversive things or acting behind a screen. So do you find that risk-taking behavior is kind of harder to prompt and provide those opportunities because it is aversive to fail, and they would rather act in a safe space rather than take that risk?
I can take a stab at it. I have different perspectives being a dad of this generation that we're talking about, and also in the position that I am work-wise. I think from a work standpoint, I still stand behind, creating a system where it's safe to fail, and we essentially teach that, because not everybody's coming in with that skill set, but it is a skill set, and it's something we could teach, and then from a parent perspective, man, what do I think about that? It's something that is part of the grind to, push a child that's less risk-taking, to take the risk, and it's part of the parenting process, but then on the flip side, when you have another child that's too risky, then it's like
Right.
slowing them down.
Like thinking like task analysis style, right? If it was a 16-year-old wanting to pass his permit test, well, he would need to perfect sitting at a table, studying, things like that, right? So my advice would be to break things down and look at it where, if nowadays kids are more aversive to the smaller things, we can model by pinpointing the first step and what you have to do that. If it's, I want to be the next wide receiver, and how often do we hear in our high school and middle school settings where the next superstar is coming soon, but you can't get them to go to the doctor appointment. It starts at home too, because some of these students don't have a car to get to pass the physical to even play, or to have the behavior to even stay on the team. So
What are some of those contingencies? Like we were talking about yesterday, I think, about how you were working with the kids in the school, and you were like, if y'all can do this every single week for the next 5 weeks, we'll do this, right? And you were kind of playing into what they were interested in, what would really drive them, right? So there's a younger generation you were working with too.
right. So that's a great question. I mean, like different settings, different things are reinforcing for different settings, but that in particular, I mean, a lot of times you go to high schools and we get sent in a room where these students, I mean, some of them have been to jail, and you're rewarding them with pencils and stickers, and it's like there's Chick-fil-A across the street. There was times where I went across the street and I got gift cards, free chicken sandwich gift cards. And the philosophy is those type of students, Sam, that are in high school and your objective is to get them back in the general ed setting. A lot of the times we'll have an individualized setting where they have like an RP sheet where they bring this point system with them to general ed. And if they get it signed off, they acquire points. You can even have a dollar system where I can pop in a general ed setting where my student is included in, and pop in and give them a few, Monopoly money. And then we have a school store, different, ramen chips, different reinforcing things that they can cash in for 3 times a day. Because sometimes if you have this student that he can't even stay in his seat and you're rewarding him at 3:00 at the end of the day, it's just not practical and realistic. So in my experience, the inner city students, opposed to an ASD setting, you can get a little more but sticking to your ethics, but you can get a little unconventional and offer things like those edible reinforcers. You can get a little more flexible in those inner cities and those ES rooms.
Sam, I'm actually kind of curious. This is your first behavior conference, and you're from a very different world and you have a very different background. What are your thoughts?
Oh, it's a whole different world. It's really interesting. Like, I think I'm constant. Like, ever since I started at this company, I've been saying that Isaac gives me a hard time, but I'm just drinking through a fire hose, right? And at first, it was more on the accounting side, on how do I bring it up to accrual, how do I get GAAP right, and that's kind of standard in every accounting setting when you're fixing books. But then the next level, trying to understand why things were set up the way they were, right? And a lot of it comes from the industry that it's in, right? How it works in the field. I think it was really interesting. I was talking to you last night about it, and Liz. And we're in all these conferences, and we're talking about how in the field we chart behaviors, right? And it was so interesting to me that, like, at the base level, like we're charting behaviors, which is almost everything that we do at the administrative level to manage the company, right? And so once I was able to kind of put these two pieces together, that it's a very unique company that operates under a behavior science structure. It doesn't operate under a typical corporate structure. It was kind of an epiphany that I had where I said, I need to align the financial world that I come from to keep our stakeholders happy, to keep the banks happy, to keep our and to keep the money flowing to our clinicians at the end of the day, right? I need to marry that world with the behavior therapy world, right? And it was a really big epiphany. And so when I talk to people like Chris, and he's telling me about how they chart people's behaviors and everything like that, right? I'm like, oh my goodness.
It was growing pains too, because how often do you hear new staff say, why are we in this room? Take them into class, and whatever happens, happens. But there's a science to it. Yeah. There's a specific science to going in a room for 5 minutes and leaving. And you're going to get these looks of there's 20 kids in a room, and why does this kid get to leave? But they don't understand that he has a severe disability, and you need to shape a behavior and behavioral momentum. So I think it's really cool that in an instant you were able to take like your expertise and say, how can I give back to the as a CFO to the top line clinicians, and like see what they're doing with students and use those same principles with staff to gain behavioral momentum.
Absolutely. And so one of the things is, like, I think he's touching on it right now, is that so when you're in the field and you're charting behavior and you're doing it for 10 people, you can do that manually, 10 people, right? And you can follow up with them, and you can put them on a schedule, and you can measure it every day. And I need to report out every day, and you know what that report out means, right? When you get to 20 people, you start going, okay, I got to be resilient, right? You're like, okay, this is going to take some resilience to manage this caseload, to chart manually for all these behaviors, to do the FBAs, to look at the RIOS, to do all this, right? You get to 50 people, you're tapping out every single time, right? And so, and I know there's like, this is all theoretical, right? Because I understand the guidelines. So imagine you're trying to apply these behavior therapy techniques that they apply in the field to their caseload of 10 people to an organization of thousands of people. And you say, okay, well, in the field, I put every behavior is individually based, right? So I put every individual on their own schedule that's going to tie to their behavior that I want to change. But then you go, now I need to manage 2,000 variable schedules across the whole staff, and it's impossible, right? And so that's where we got to when I came in, is we had all these measurement schedules that varied to change an individual staff behavior, and none of them were effective because it was too much to manage at an administrative level. And it all just got...
Especially at our size.
Exactly.
It's not like we're a small mom and pop
thousands
company.
of people,
Right.
exactly. So and then if you think about it, if you're not getting the behavior that you want out of your staff, it's impacting the thousands of kids that we serve too. So that, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the variable programs, how do we address it? The way is to standardize positions and then standardize KPIs by position so that you know when this person's in the role, this is what they're doing. And everybody that's in that position should have similar behavior to begin with because of that role, right? Because of how we're hiring. So then you can apply these KPIs across the board to change the behavior that you're looking for to the people that are susceptible to it being changed, right? So it's taken a big change in my head to be like accounting. I always say this. Accounting, if you were to just do it by month-end close, and a lot of companies do it quarterly, right? So if you were to do quarterly, let's just start there, you get 4 points of data throughout the year, right? You do it monthly, you get 12. That is not near enough for behavior. Not near enough.
That's a really good point.
So I come in and I'm like, yeah, Brett, we close on a monthly basis. That's when we get our numbers. And he's literally like, that's not fast enough, bro. You know? I was
I'm thinking like, what? The last 4 weeks, man, I don't know what's going to show. I need to know for next week. Yeah, exactly.
It goes back to the feedback question, because I, as a state leader, the financial numbers are feedback for us of how we're doing, and the longer the delay, the longer we don't know, and then it starts feeling like foggy, you know. So the sooner we get it, then the more sensitive we are to that feedback, and we can make corrective changes, type of thing. So that's that to me, and it plays the feedback game, you know.
Totally. And then we run into these system limitations, right? For example, I think this is a good one. We're trying to figure out the cadence, and another big hump that I think we've overcome at this point, but that was tough, was getting everybody on the same understanding of the numbers, right? From accrual accounting, which will be like month-end close that takes a while to produce. It's very formal. It's very it's a grind, right? Versus operational data that's getting the data in the hands of the people who need it immediately, right? Who billed, what they bill, what's our auth utilization rate, stuff along those lines that we need the state leaders to see every single day. So I think that was kind of a pull and push that we've had over the past 8 months on, trust me, we're going to get the accounting right, and then we're going to figure out the operational data, but getting to the same understanding of what we're even looking at. And when you look at it from an accounting perspective, revenue operationally versus accounting, it's the same numbers. Where you're literally pulling the same hours that are the same revenue that was billed, but accounting, you break it up by data service, you accrue for this period, right? Whereas operational, it's what did we bill the last 2 weeks? What did we bill the last week, right? The other system limitation that we have is payroll. Payrolls ran bi-weekly, right? And so when I first got in here, payrolls ran every week. And that is one of the things that was, from a behavior science standpoint, good, because we're able to reinforce rapidly. But from managing cash flow and a company's perspective, it was tough because we weren't able to manage cash flow. We're sending it out quicker than we were receiving the cash, right? And then on top of it, we couldn't measure the payroll runs comparatively, because one payroll run is for the bulk of everything, and then another payroll run is for supplemental bonuses. And so you got to split them out and compare them this way and compare them that way. It was an impossible task, right? So we had to come in and we had to say, okay, we're going on a standard biweekly payroll run, right? So that we could move. But what it's done is going to align our reporting, because now payroll's processed every 2 weeks. Once it's processed in the system, the data's live in our systems and we can look at it, right? But that means that we're limited to biweekly operational reports because that's when the data is available, right? It's not available until it's ran. So that's what we've been kind of get to is like, how rapidly can we get this financial data and have it accurate and that it matters and that it's going to tie out forever, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, to touch on the operational side of it, that's been a huge standpoint. And this is just the beginning. I want to get to a point where we could operate the company on a biweekly basis. And then the next goal is to operate the company on a daily and weekly basis, you know, but the steps to get from monthly to biweekly is tough. To get from biweekly to weekly is tough. Weekly to daily, you know, so, but we're on our way.
With everything that you've been doing, I know Sam comes to us with a very fine-tuned skill set, right? And we've made a lot of changes in the organization. So Brett and Isaac, if you were to speak to an up-and-coming entrepreneur in the ABA industry, what would you tell them to do if they were building an organization from scratch to look out for?
Don't do it.
It's not as easy as you think.
Well, I guess,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I would say just be prepared every single day when you wake up for chaos. If you can handle chaos and unpredictability and adapt to it very rapidly, just with stuff being piled on, and be able to, I'd say, like, work at the micro level 1 minute with granular level problems, and then be able to step back and look at it from the macro level and on a daily basis switch back and forth, and just be ready to put everything up. Like, be ready to empty your gas tank for everyone else. And then
for every day too, right? Every day.
Every day.
I think that's a huge thing that you've said over and over is there is no work-life balance when starting an organization, especially an ABA one, because it's so unpredictable in terms of funding sources. Liz, I'm sure you could speak to that. Hiring needs, just like overall client needs. So I think that's a huge thing to highlight for people.
I would say even with our admin team, I think a lot of people in the field think that becoming an admin is a cakewalk.
Right.
And that they're like, I would love to get out of the field. And I'm like, you get to go home at night and go to bed.
Right. Yeah.
And like, maybe you think about your client's behavior a little bit, but I'm like, you're not up until 3 a.m. auditing session notes and doing those things. But I think with that, like, you have to have a good team, and it is hard to have like a work-life balance. I think both as a, someone running the company and then also as like an administrator for a company this large. It's not as easy as everybody thinks it is, and it's a lot of work.
I couldn't agree more. And because from an admin standpoint, you have to understand everybody works 9 to 5, 9 to 7, whenever they get out of their session. And guess what? If they're going to come to you with a problem, it's after work. And then as you just worked all day, now I have to deal with the person who came home from work and they need an answer to their problem.
And they're usually not happy, right?
Right. So like, just as you had like a stressful day, and now you have to handle someone else's stressful day. So you have to take all of these things into consideration.
Yeah, it's not taking away. I know our staff works so hard.
Absolutely.
And there are definitely days where I'm like, I prefer this than when I was in the field. Like but I understand how challenging it is for them. I just think sometimes even their perspective of that it's a cakewalk and that
It's
it doesn't have its
glorified,
unique
right.
challenges. Like being in the field has unique challenges. I think being an admin and running a company has unique challenges. So I think we both have to recognize each other. Like we have to understand that they're not going to be 100% in converting their timesheets every day because they might have just gotten slapped across the face and their shirt ripped open and spit on, and then they come home and they just want to spend time with their families and go to bed. So we have to have compassion for what they're going through. And we also need them to have compassion for the never turning it off.
How do you bridge that gap with your admin team across the multiple states that the admin team manages, right? The disconnection, I think one of the things is like that we saw is a lot of our admin team had been admin for so long, they almost forgot what it's like to be in the field, right? And so one of the things that I think we've been working on and done a good job of, especially Liz, is trying to bridge that disconnect between our admin team and the field, and reinforcing that the admin team is here to serve our clinicians, right? And that's like so important that the whole there would be no administrative role if there's no people in the field doing the work and serving the thousands of kids. How do you bridge that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a challenge because I know we often talk about we're here because of our clinicians. We're here to support and serve them. Without them, and it's totally true. But you also have to walk the fine line because administration is also important. So you don't want to completely minimize their role and only focus on that because, you know, on the flip side, the clinicians are able to do what they do because administrators are working on the back end, you know, and busting their butts to then allow clinicians to do what they do. So to me, it's more of a marriage, and it's more of we rely on each other. So I think that's the balance that I try to raise with the different states, that we need each other, right? You know, we need the clinicians and we need to support them because they're providing the service and they're making the impact. And then in return, you know, the administrators are working on the back end, back of the house stuff to help relieve them of all those things. And, you know, that's typically the perspective that I try to.
Do you
have
do
with
like
both.
team building activities between your admin team and the people in the field? Like, what's that typically look
Yeah,
like?
I mean, one of the things that was so important for us is we have a community building team, right? So last year I was given the feedback of people didn't feel like they were close enough to each other. The typical side effect that you get in the field is that we work on our own little island. I don't even know who I'm working with, you know. And then a lot of the work that I was doing on building a resilient workforce, one of the things is community building. It's so important to build a resilient workforce. So then I took all of that and I said, okay, so I established a committee of people that were super motivated to do this, and then we have a quarterly goal of creating a community building activity at the company. So then they take a look at what's going to be reinforcing to our staff, you know, and then they set up some type of activity, you know, whether it's going to the beach or whatever it is. And it's just been such a commitment. So we're trying to create the cadence of a quarterly community building activity to offer this opportunity for all of our staff to get together, the ones that want to, and just really build community. And it's beginning to take form because people are starting to ask, like, oh, when's our next one, type of thing. So I think it's been something that's been really important, you know, and offering that space for community building.
I think having the administrators at those events is so important. Like, I was running a lot of the ones for Pennsylvania, and to me it was important to be there because I'm compliance. I'm the one nagging them all of the time, and my job is to tell them things that they can improve on. And so to me, it's important for me to be there and to get FaceTime with the staff so that way they can understand, like, okay, she's a person too. She's not mean. Like, I'm not that intimidating.
I'm not being deep-faked.
Yeah, I'm really trying to support you guys, and I can tell them the why behind things. And I think it just humanizes me a little bit and helps with that exchange. And then kind of going with that, I think also having some administrative tasks that tie us back into the field a little bit help. Like, I just had a new administrator that's going to be doing scheduling in Pennsylvania, and I was thinking about, like, what's something else I can give her? And I'm like, I think I want to also have her do a little bit of time doing the client check-in calls for her audit, because that's something that grounds her back into the field. It's so easy to get so caught up in, I'm just prompting people all the time. Oh my gosh, why aren't they doing their job? Whereas if you're talking to parents or you're doing staff check-in calls for a portion of your day, it really grounds you and brings you back to, like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. I love client calls. I love intakes. It's been hard for me to give up because it's the thing that has kept me grounded in 7 years of prompting people.
what you're hitting on, it's interesting because that point that you just made directly impacts our entire organization, because exactly what Chris just started in a new role, and I was like, look, man, if there's any tip I could give you that would give you longevity and provide quality services at the administrative level with recruitment and hiring, is to not get out of touch with what's happening in the field, because we've had that happen. As an organization grows, there's one layer after another, and that's also a result of one layer after another. People are disconnected with what happens in the field, and they forget why they're there, and they forget, like you said, that they're like the administrators are servants to the people on the front line. And the only way that you're regularly remembering that is you're seeing the grind out there. And it also allows you to keep tweaking systems, like, that's not really what happens out there. This is what happens out there. And when Chris when we first talked about the role, I'm like, just promise me you'll stay in tune with what goes on the ground, because seeing 21 years of, it's like every 4 to 5 years, there's this situation where we're building, and we're to the point where there's just hierarchical red tape.
But how are you supposed to prep people for being in the field if you're not in touch with what's happening in the field, or even like changing our interviewing questions? In Pennsylvania, that was a huge thing, and getting like Chuck and Mike involved in the team was that we were having staff coming in and we were really struggling with them. So we're like, we need someone in the field to cater the questions to the challenges that we're currently seeking, and to be like, what is the common thing I'm seeing as to why people aren't being successful, and how can I prep people for what's happening in the field? How can I weed people out? So I think you being in the field is going to be a huge asset to the New Jersey side of things.
I learned so much about you all the time, and one of the things that I really admire is the fact that, Liz, I always kept wondering, what's the reason that you're not delegating the sub pool and like being able to spin this off into this other task? But there were a couple of reasons. One, you wanted to make sure shit was done right. And the other thing is just what you touched on. It put you in touch with how to better run operations when you saw the sub pool and where to deploy people, and it kept you in tune with what the next step were. And that was, as we grew and the bloat occurred, the very beginning of the chain of hiring didn't really know what was going on at the end, and as a result of that, it was just sheer chaos. But someone who knows, who's dialed in from the moment someone's hired till the moment they're deployed and understands that process is going to be way better at serving those folks.
I think another good example of this is like the CR support forum, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when a couple, like I guess 6-8 weeks ago now, like it's kind of out there. This is one of our most brutal processes. It's a Saturday night grind. You got to go through it. All of our staff on the East Coast submit their central reach problems, and central reach is how you submit your time, how you submit your plans and everything, and scheduling everything. So thousands of people submitting their problems, and we need it all submitted by Saturday night so we can get payroll ran. And we kind of had some movement in who was running the process, and it's out there. And I'll never forget calling a couple people, and one of them I called, he was literally like, man, I got kids, man. Please don't make me do this on a Saturday night, you know? And I was like, just help me out for a couple weeks, brother, you know? Like, please, you know, until we figure this out.
Just sprint a little bit.
I'm like, I won't make it permanent, right? And then so I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm not the most adept at central reach when it comes to the clinical side of it, right? And it's something I'm still learning. But Liz is just, a whiz with it. Liz the whiz. And
these nicknames, man.
My nicknames have been flowing.
Can we
this
just
week.
have
I
like
think I got
a
like
list
5
here
new
of all
ones.
of Liz's names in the video?
She's a weapon of mass production.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think
1,
that was
2,
Paul.
That was
3,
Paul, yeah.
4.
And so, but she came in and she was like, okay, this impacts me directly, right? It impacts your compliance directly. And she saw that and said, well, this is going to roll uphill to me anyways, eventually, right? Through audits or through compliance questions or through misses, and it already had been. And she just took the process over completely and was like, Sam, I'll run this. Let me figure it out with the staff who's running it. And it's been incredible. And I think that's one of the key things that makes Liz such a weapon for the company, and that we're looking for constantly within the company, is somebody to say, hey, the buck stops here. You know, and I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to get this working, right? And now I see the process. She's training up the staff on it. He's slowly getting better at pushing everything out and improving, right?
Side note, he's crushed it the last 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Shout
So
out
this
to
is what we
Lindsay.
love to hear. This is what we like to hear.
Lindsay, he really has, like, honestly, like the last 2 weeks, I feel like his production with it has skyrocketed, and he's, I knew it was going to be a very slow process, and he's surpassed my expectations the last couple of weeks, honestly. And I was just talking to him, and he's like, I can't believe I missed that one. And I was like, it's okay. Like, this is a lot of information. Like, it's not something that could have just gone to somebody. You have to understand so much. And I'm so proud of him. He's doing a fantastic job.
And that's
I was just
what-
telling him
and-
that this week. So
I was gonna say, and that's what makes a great leader. We've been talking about this from the very beginning. Is Liz knows she knows the job, so she's able to supervise accordingly, provide constructive feedback, but also when he makes a mistake, give him the feedback of like, this is rough as hell and you've been crushing
Yeah.
it. So yes, you made a mistake, but everything else looks amazing. And that's what gives someone the confidence to keep going.
We were looking
so
at
Liz
things and he was
literally
beating
just
himself up, and
encompassed
I was like,
everything we've been
Lindsay,
talking
this
about.
is the first time in 6 weeks we've had this problem. I was like, I haven't seen it on a form yet. There's no way that like you could know that. Like that's what this is for. It's meant to be an ongoing training thing, but doing the forms has helped me be a lot more connected with the compliance stuff. And I think we found systemic issues. So I tell all my team, I'm like, dive into everything and like see how things connect. That's
And
the biggest
I
thing that
think the
makes you
other
be
thing
productive.
is Liz, she's hungry, right? So like when you're in a management position, I remember when I was first cutting my teeth in accounting, and I was constantly asking for feedback. I'm like, man, how can I get better? How can I get better? And they'd always tell me, they'd just be like, oh, just be hungry for more, right? And I'd be like, I'm asking you, give me something to do,
I
right?
can
Like,
definitely
you know?
contest to that. You
And,
definitely ask all the right questions. And when you don't know something, you're like, just tell me more. And then you sit and listen, and then you retain it and then spit it back out to other people. And I see that in conversation. I'm like, shit, he was really listening.
it's and like, but then it's just like I was probably 22, 23, and like just really getting started, and this flip switched in my head where I was like, I don't need to ask them to give me something. I need to go and see what they're doing and say, let me take this off your plate and I'll figure it out. You don't even need to train me. Just give me the work paper, tell me what I have to do, and I'll figure it out. And this was before AI, so it was way harder. Okay, I was
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm like sitting at the spreadsheet, it has like 1,000 tabs, and I'm like, I should have offered, you know. But really, but so it's funny because that's something that Liz does naturally, and that I think that we're constantly looking for from our staff, and it's how people move up in BDA rapidly, is they take complete ownership, and instead of saying, give me more, they take more. They say, let me help you with that, and they pull it off your plate, and then you don't hear about it again, and you go, how's that process going? Oh my, you're killing it. Oh my goodness, you know.
That's one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last couple of years that has been challenging, and just adapting to COVID, adapting to the government's printing of money, then to the quantitative tightening, to the interest rates, to all the macro events, the wars, all these things. They create so much chaos, and the thing that really pulls it all together is the team all knowing that they have each other's back as a unit. That's the thing that is getting us through the shit.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that. I don't know. There was a point where I really did feel alone, probably a year and a half ago, where I'm like, wow, man, I'm kind of doing this for right now to see other people succeed, but there was a handful of folks that maybe just didn't care if they succeeded or not. But then just like I was saying, in the past maybe 6 months, I started seeing the people that care. And it gave me that invigoration to be like, let's go another decade, let's go another 2 decades, And when you see people, it's the whole reason that when you're talking about culture and having these gatherings, it's the reason, when I do interviews, I'll ask the question, why are you leaving your other role? And it's almost never about their colleagues and things like they're not leaving because of their colleagues. They're usually leaving due to leadership, but the reason they're staying is because of that culture built, and they don't want to let down their colleague. And that is huge. So the more that we keep building these cohesive groups, people don't want to let down the people they care about. Even if you're paid very little, you build a relationship, and you don't want to screw over your colleague and call out the next day. So
Yeah, I think
those things are so important.
There's a quote that I've used, that people don't stay because of the work, they stay because of the people. So, and I mean, I've experienced it in different jobs. I mean, you take a look at, we were presenting with Nikki, who's been at her company for 25 years. I've seen firsthand it's because of the people, the people that you bond with. So I think it's so true, that community building piece.
I mean, even like something totally random. Every Monday, I was on a contract recently in PA, 35 people on it, right? So the district director every Monday would say, put your favorite song, doesn't matter what genre, in the group chat. And then that was a way for us all to connect Monday, or we do a topic. But it's just a small things that, that keep you connected, and, remember that we all have each other's backs,
Just wondering, because everyone in their respective areas are like thought leaders here, and you're really, through this kind of thing, we're kind of letting people know from our failures and things like that, but you're also able to step back and look at the big picture. What do you guys really think the future of our industry is going to be like? Because I'm
a lot of
interested to see
AI.
what you think. What's the future going to look like of our industry?
The only feedback I have, and you guys can all piggyback off of this, is we're only going to have more children being born with disabilities and more children to service. So the bigger we can expand and get with AI, I think the better, because we're only going to have more children and more humans to service as time goes on, with harder, more severe behaviors, because there is a trend, I'm sure, from 10 years ago till now, where there's more students, we get sent to ERI rooms, and so I'm sure, like, as time goes on, these are only going to become more severe problems that need more intense support.
A thought to piggyback off that with you mentioned AI. I think with the higher scrutiny of our funding sources and of our politics, and I think we're gonna have to leverage technology to be more efficient while we're under more scrutiny. So I think we're kind of in a very vulnerable time, because I think we're under the microscope because of how expensive our services are. That one, we have to cross our T's, dot our I's. We have to be able to be efficient in producing results, and we have to be ethical and compliant, or else the funding is going to be stripped away, and then that's going to risk our profession.
Sorry, no, I was going to say, in addition to efficiency, I think we're going to get more errorless data, which again, it's going to take a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how to incorporate AI in your organization. But the more you can utilize it, the less errors you're going to get, and the more time your clinicians will have to do all of the other things on their checklist. And then the funding sources won't be able to ding you as often, because things will be on point, and we've been able to shape our behavior to submit near perfect authorizations or near perfect session
Well,
notes.
I think our funding sources are also going to start using AI to detect audit errors. So if they're using AI to find all of our faults, we need to use it to minimize those, like just even simple documentation things. Like, I feel like we can have the best clinician and they just might not be the strongest at writing a session note. So having tools to help us like find those clinicians and train them, it's so impossible to see those things coming in frequently. Like, I think leveraging AI to have staff be able to document things in a way that the insurance companies understand. I think none of our clinicians mean to do anything wrong, but sometimes they don't necessarily
I
document
agree
it
with you. And I
in
think
that way.
many people are so heavy on digging their heels in and not using AI. Unfortunately, I think that's what will make your ABA company become obsolete or go under, is because things will get so stringent that you won't get reimbursed. And then you won't be able to
And
make
AI is gonna make
payroll,
it more
and then your
stringent.
company will have to close down, or you'll have to merge with someone, or
And just in the field in general, I think one really big thing that is ahead of us that could be a challenge for the science is that, especially funding sources are catching on to this. Their bad application of behavior analytic principles creates dependency. So if you don't really understand the application of the principles, you literally you have someone that's a vulnerable population, and you create dependency by not weaning out those artificial consequences and things like that. So funders are looking at that. They're saying, okay, are you generalizing this? Are you just providing 40 hours of intensive ABA in a vacuum? Or are you doing it in a real setting? So I think funding sources, they may have different reasons for looking at it. They want to cut the costs. They want to see that it's a finite amount. But the poor application of it, and that's where AI will help with precision of measurement. It'll help us understand better the functional analysis, the application of how to wean our reinforcers so that way the individual is progressing on their own. But I think that's a really big risk that we face right now. Poor application of it, creating behavior problems, and then just sheer dependency.
Yeah. I was just going to say, at the end of the day, we have to produce results. I think one of our bottom lines is to produce results and get our learners better, so that way they don't depend on us. And that's going to be something super
Because
important.
if we don't do it right, we're going to be blamed like the pharmaceutical industry, where the pharmaceutical industry is constantly criticized for keeping people dependent on medications because they make money.
Even in schools, when we pitch to superintendents to hire our services, oftentimes it's you're saving money buying our staff because of our experience and professionalism, where essentially like one of our staff are two of the other agency.
That or like we're not here forever.
Right.
We will eventually fade
Right.
ourselves out of a job and graduate to someone else who needs our support.
Yeah,
'Cause
so
that should be the goal, is
But it
for us
brings-
to
Right,
always
so-
fade
It
us out
almost
of a
brings you
job.
back to the discussion about having children and how you want them to go through struggle and then it's like you want them to go through the worst things in life, come through the other side on their own. Because if you're constantly helping them through every situation, they really don't build the resilience or the independence. So I think that's a really big issue in our industry. And if we could, our funding sources are not going to just keep paying for endless fucking ABA. They're going to want to know, what are the criteria for fading? What are the criteria for acceptable treatment outcomes? And then how do you wean it? That's why I see a real big movement towards the parent training.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
There is a lot of that. Another thing I've noticed, and I don't know, Isaac, if you've had this in any of your funding sources, but we've started to have ones where we're not being reviewed by BCBAs anymore. And it's people who are not in this field. So it's also hard because like I was on a peer-to-peer and they issued me a denial because they said you didn't have a direct assessment. And we were like, what are you talking about? There's an ABC data chart in there. And they said, what's that? And I was like, a direct assessment tool. So it's also hard. And I think that's kind of where AI even comes into it, is the insurance companies don't fully understand ABA. So it's also trying to like explain it to them and make sure that it's still sound for us. And I feel like using AI even to align with like the insurance company, exactly how they want to write it. Like we had to start putting in our templates direct assessment and then putting ABC data under it. And like knowing that a kid can lose services because of that, or that somebody who doesn't fully understand is looking at our stuff. Like I think we need to use technology to help us get in line and to prevent those things.
And meet them where they are. What are they looking for
Yeah.
so we can do our job?
Yeah. And we want to titrate, but there's definitely instances I've seen where it's almost an inappropriate amount of titration that's being recommended because there's not an understanding. We're not talking to our actual peers. We're not talking to BCBAs. I'm talking to someone this is their first ABA plan and they don't know anything about it. And they're like, I just have this checklist I'm following.
They don't understand that even a week of waiting for a reauthorization report to get reapproved, the families can go through detrimental situations because of that pause in routine. And I've seen it happen firsthand. And, so that would make me really happy if we were able to, eliminate reauthorization reports getting denied.
When I think about the future of it from a business perspective, I think one of the things that we've been talking about is data collection, but at like a minute by minute and second by second basis, right? Like we're talking about the wearables and how we can collect data on behavior, like physical data on behavior. Think about recognizing antecedents from spikes in blood pressure far before the behavior happens, right? So I see
terminology down.
yeah, I see the movement towards data collection at a super granular physical standpoint. And then the other aspect I see is similar to what we've been touching on this whole time is businesses applying the science to their enterprise at an enterprise level, right? And getting performance out of their staff at a whole different granular level than they're getting right now. And that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time is finance operates at a very slow cadence at a top-down approach, right? Where behavior science operates on a very rapid change the behavior right in that moment. And if you can marry those two, you can really create an enterprise model that's like a flywheel, and that's just buzzing constantly with data flowing through it from all the way at the bottom to all the way at the top. So that's how I see the science being applied in the future for sure.
Yeah, because you brought something up when you that's interesting from an outsider's perspective. When you came in, you're like, why are there so many of these individual pay for performance things that are impossible to track? But I also see where you came with that optic too. I was like, yeah, this is just really messy trying to. And then I think back about the roots of applied behavior analysis and how it evolved that way, because personalized systems of instruction for learners and employees to kind of meet them where they are and find out what needs to be rewarded for their role, right? But that's just not sustainable as you grow as an organization. And you helped us kind of step back from that and realize that just because you need individualized systems doesn't mean every one of them has to be chaotic and different, right? Because it just muddies the water. But when you bring up the enterprise level, that's really what you're talking about. All right, how do we still capture individual incentives that people care about, but also do it at a scale? If you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people, and we truly appreciate your support.